Good morning and welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Tony Haggerty. We're here to discuss all the Celtic news and views ahead of potentially another Scottish Premiership title confirmed and won this weekend. Hamish is off today, so I'm your host for the next half hour or so. We'll have a good wee chat. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Celtic Way is brought to you by S1 Jobs. It's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Glasgow and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. Start your search today. Mr. Tony Haggerty, how are you doing this morning?
I'm very well, sir. How are you? Sun's out.
Yes.
Lovely day. It's a lovely
As-
weekend to clinch the title, is it not, John?
I was thinking about this morning. It's the time of year that Celtic win a title. It's almost as regular as the weather seasons these days. I'm not sure the weathermen could predict the amount of titles that Celtic have won over the last 14 years. It's only not happened once in the last 14 years, and nobody was allowed out of their house that year anyway.
Correct, John. So, it's been, we talk about it a lot. It's been an incredible era of dominance, whatever way you want to pronounce that word. And it's 13 out of 14, title number 55, hopefully incoming tomorrow. And yeah, I want to see Celtic wrap it up in style, John. I really do.
Yeah.
I want them to go out there and score a few goals. And we were talking about the 5-0 stuff and all that. And I don't want to be blasé. Celtic will need to earn the right to win tomorrow in that match. But I'd like to see them, if they can manage something like that, it'd be great to see that. Conversely, just get the point that's required. But I'd really want to see us win the match, John. I want to see us win every game between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, listen, people will accuse Celtic fans of being arrogant for celebrating all the success, accuse Celtic of arrogance. This is just the reality of it, though. The reality of the scale of Celtic's success over the last 14 years or so is that it makes you an enemy of decency. It's just like it's an embarrassment of riches almost, So that seems to be the way it's going. But for Celtic, it's not embarrassing. There'll be no embarrassment in the Celtic camp tomorrow if Celtic do win the title. It's another trophy. It's another bit of success, and I agree. I think you want to do Celtic. You want Celtic to do it in style, and undoubtedly. I've got a few things I want to talk about today, Tony. One of them is the amount of goal scoring Celtic have done this season. Now, there'll be a few people maybe aware of this, but Celtic have scored 143 goals this season in total. The high watermark this century, since the turn of the century, was another Brendan Rodgers team in 2016-17. They scored 150 goals that season. So there's a chance that Celtic are going to hit a level of goal scoring this season in the final chunk of matches beyond 150 that is on a scale that we haven't seen since the days of Jock Stein at Celtic. So that's just something to consider, especially when people have talked about some of the form Celtic have shown this year. Has it been good enough in spells? That there's been a couple of derby defeats, but that, going past the 150 mark and setting a new standard this century, Tony, and would be remarkable from this team.
No, they just keep hitting records, don't they, under Brendan Rodgers? I mean, the other week they had the most amount of passes in one football match, didn't they? 1,020, which wasn't, I think we mentioned it and we wrote about it, but it wasn't covered greatly in any great detail, But these are things that please the manager greatly. He talks about that kind of stuff, and scoring 150 goals would be, as you say, it would be incredible. But you only have to look at, I think we were talking about it the other day, was it 10 players that have scored 10 or more goals?
I think it's 7, Tony, but it's 7. The last time 7 or more Celtic players scored double figures in a season was way back in 1966-67, which we all know about the mythical status of that season. So that's again, but that's a hallmark of Brendan Rodgers' time. I think twice before, as teams in 2016-17 and 17-18 had 6 players reach double figures, and I think that is a hallmark of Rodgers. He likes to diversify Celtic's attack, and he likes the responsibility to be on the unit rather than individuals. And I know Daiza Maeda's gone beyond 30 goals this season, but the fact that there's 7 players that have hit double figures just shows that the goals are coming from all over the squad.
Well, one of the first things he said when he came into the team and he inherited Matt O'Reilly, he told him his numbers weren't good enough. And hey presto, he turned Matt O'Reilly into a goal scorer, didn't he? Because he said to him, a guy who's as good as you and as talented as you should be scoring more goals. So clearly Matt O'Reilly listened, and then he ended up having his best scoring season ever in his career. So it's clearly something that he instills into the players, that and he's always talked about he doesn't need a striker to score 30 and 40 goals as long as lots of other people are chipping in and weighing in with goals. So he clearly tells that to the players that, yeah, he might be a number 9, but you're a goal scorer too, or you should be. And that's what I like about it, because I think that's a great testament to Brendan Rodgers' teams, that, 7 players have hit 10 or more this season. I think that's terrific. And they could hit more, that 150 goal mark. I think you shift your goalposts as you move during the season, don't you? You'll be telling those, get that done. I want that also on record, down in black and white, in the statistics. And he loves all those kind of things, and I think he loves the fact that he talks about the team playing that kind of fast-flowing football with a cutting edge. And you quite rightfully said, yeah, there's been a tapering off this season. A couple of Rangers games where it's not worked out to supporters' satisfaction or the players and the manager's satisfaction. But in the main, Celtic put themselves in a wonderful position to be going tomorrow to Tannadice to clinch this title in the first game of the split. So it doesn't negate that the position that they put themselves into. They played some superb stuff right up until Christmas. Then everybody should all have dropped 14 points since the turn of the year. Yeah, they have, but they're still winning the league in a canter. So that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, and just to put into context, so they've scored 143 already this season. They've got 6 games left to break through 150. Last year, Tony, the total was only 115. So that shows the jump up in the amount of scoring. And that's probably owing to the tricky first few months that Brendan Rodgers had when he returned. It wasn't pretty at points. The goals weren't coming freely. And obviously Celtic were put out of the League Cup early, so there was no scope to rack up scorelines in that competition. But it does show like a 30-goal improvement with 6 games to go is pretty remarkable, and does show that progress has been made. And Brendan Rodgers talked about this, that the progress made in an attacking sense is because he feels the team are more aggressive defensively, and that the spoils, if you will, of scoring come from the hard work that's put in before Celtic regain possession. And that's what Brendan Rodgers is all about. And I think you're right when you're talking about you shift the goalposts. Brendan Rodgers has already said he's set targets for this like mini season, if you will, in the last 5 games of the Premiership and obviously the Scottish Cup final. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of those targets is racking up as many goals as possible, keeping clean sheets. Like he likes all those little mini targets, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I think that's how you keep players motivated and hungry, isn't it, for success? You set them these kind of goals before the end of the season, that the league's not won, the treble's not won. How can we win this in style? Well, here's what I would love to do. And you put them up there and you say to them, can you achieve that? And you say to players, go and achieve that, go and do that, go and show why you're the best team in the country, go and show why you're on the verge of another treble. And himself as well. I think he was asked a question last week about, being the first manager in Celtic's history to win the treble 3 times. Does it motivate him? Does he think about things like that? And he said, clearly it does. I think that was his answer. Clearly it does. So he wants to be the best as well. He wants Celtic to be the best representation of themselves and those players to achieve what alongside them. So I think it is important, and that's what will drive Celtic, as he say, the famous expression, bust through the tapes. You're starting to see that now. It started against Kilmarnock when they got their mojo back with a 5-1 win. Last week it could have been anything it wanted, settled for 5. And, so I think that will continue, John, and that's not arrogance. You're just seeing a team determined to do it in style, and also maybe stung a wee bit by recent criticism. And still, in the ether, there are people having pot shots at them, various media things.
That's going to happen. I think this is kind of what I was talking about at the start, Tony. When you win so much, you naturally make yourself the enemy of people who aren't winning. And that's just what football is. And I think at times, almost Celtic have to own that almost. Like, they will have detractors. There will be these critics. There will be these people having a pop. But I think that is just a natural byproduct of the scale of what Celtic have achieved. As we say, it's potentially And again, I'll remind everyone in the chat, because they do like to remind us of this, the treble hasn't been won yet, but it's potentially a sixth treble in the last 9 years. And so that's naturally going to throw up people who don't want to see Celtic do that. Whether they're neutral, they don't really have anything against Celtic, really. They just don't like seeing that level of dominance in football, because football's supposed to be a competitive sport. It's supposed to bring out the best of everyone, but it seems to be Celtic that's thriving at the moment. But like as I've said before, Tony, like this disparity in competition and finances, this is not unique to Scottish football, and Celtic aren't going to put on the brakes because it's convenient for the other teams and other people. You know, I don't want to go on a rant. I don't want to go on my soapbox again. But really, what are people expecting here? That Celtic take their foot off the gas just to make it a bit more palatable for people who are having a go?
And I think Callum McGregor alluded to that yesterday, didn't he, as well? And which was great to hear. Correct. I don't know about you. I've never found it tedious, to use the word of the week, or boring that Celtic win. I lived through the 90s, John, and I never saw those labels attached to the other club on the other side of the city when they were doing their thing. Nobody ever wrote that it was tedious and boring. It was always wonderful and fantastic and rampant Rangers, all this kind of stuff. You know, I never read any kind of negativity surrounding Rangers' era of success, which, as we all know, panned out the way it did. And so I never take anything for granted with regards to Celtic, but it's never boring to me. I love the fact that tomorrow I'll be in situ at Tannadice and I could see another title. ... the 55th, John. Just keep adding that in for a laugh. You know what I mean? It bothers me how many titles Celtic have won, as long as you just keep winning the title. You know, and it never loses its appeal for me. And see, if it does lose its appeal for you, then, you know, football's not your game. Basically, you know, it can never lose its appeal. And I think that's why Brendan Rodgers is able to do it with different sets of players and tell them these are special times. It never wanes. It never gets boring. And you know, to be on the verge of a third treble, granted, as you said, it's not won with different sets of players as a Celtic manager, for me is an incredible achievement. It really is.
I don't think it's really, obviously Celtic have immense resources and signed good players, the best players in this pool of football in the world. But on a day-to-day basis, the hard work that the players have to do to maintain their levels and ensure that this success is brought is not easy. It's not easy for the players. It's not easy to maintain that focus, and that has to be admired, I think, even if other people won't. Then I think it's also on the duty of, like, we do this professionally, but we're obviously Celtic minded. So I think the duty is on us as professional observers and people who cover Celtic to celebrate the good parts of Celtic, because there'll be plenty who won't, because of the scale of the success, and so the onus is on us and supporters to be proud of what Celtic are achieving.
I think the onus is on us to sort of back Celtic when you read stuff like what you read during the week. I mean, I can't get my head around that. I really can't. But, you know, each to their own. Journalists are entitled to their opinion, but so are we. You know, we are working journalists, you know, Celtic fans in the media. We've never ever had that. Why should we? But when somebody's going to come out and say something, I mean, I think it's preposterous and utterly ridiculous. But again, the journalist that wrote it's entitled to that opinion. But don't expect the likes of you or I to say, do you know what, you've got a point there. You know, it's ludicrous. And, you know, so we're coming down on the side of the fact that you don't see the day-to-day workings of how hard that football team have worked this season to put themselves in a position where they're on the cusp of another treble. Aberdeen will quite rightfully have something to say about that come Hampden May the 24th. But, you know, to even manoeuvre yourself into that position and have the chance to have a crack at another treble, again, I go back to it. It starts back in July, pre-season. And, you know, I'm sure Brendan Rodgers will have said to me, made a point, he made a point several times. I mentioned the fact that they lost the League Cup at Kilmarnock last year. So he's clearly, that's been one of the non-shifting of the goalposts. That was one that stayed firm. Get those trophies back. That's what I demand of you. That's what the Celtic supporters want from you. They don't expect it, but it's high on their wish list if it can be achieved. And the work that goes into doing that, John, it's incredible. It's solid, you know. And I don't think you can knock. How can you ever go at a team for being in that position? It really scrambles my brain. Doesn't take much, to be fair, to do that. But yeah,
I think everyone. I'm just saying to everyone in the chat, I think Tony will be going into the press box at Tannadice tomorrow with a big smile on his face.
Of course.
The chat is lively this morning. Everyone's a bit excited about this weekend. I think Celtic, the day the title is confirmed for Celtic, I think is always a special day for supporters, regardless of where it comes or when it comes or the circumstances around it. And obviously Tannadice has been a very happy place in that regard. You know, twice since I've been supporting Celtic, I think it's happened. And
3 times in history, John.
Yeah.
1901, 2008, and under Ange as well.
Yeah. I mean, not to go down memory lane too much, but that 2007-8 season was remarkable, and the way that climaxed at Tannadice was one of my favourite memories of supporting Celtic over the years. That season really stands out to me as a really special time, the way that Celtic came back in that league and all the stuff around Tommy Burns. But I just remember that being a pretty cathartic experience from a Celtic's perspective.
Yeah, and they won 8 in a row, John, under Strachan, and they won back-to-back Rangers games at Celtic Park and missed a penalty, and a late penalty. Scott McDonagh, but Jan Vennegoor still popped up with a goal, and I think utter bedlam that night. You know, so that team was, you know, you mentioned Tommy Burns, a force that was maybe driving them to that, and they never let go of that team till you know they gave everything and got the reward. And as you say, that I think that one at Tannadice as well is a very sweet one and stays and lingers in the memory for the fact that it was, you know, the fact that it was poignant and very romantic with Tommy Burns, the sad passing of Tommy Burns, and it was a fitting ending for that team. The way they burst through the tape, as you say, by you know, 8 in a row, and it was great. It was a joy to watch that. As I say, Saturday for me will be hopefully another great occasion, and hopefully Celtic can get the point required. I want 3.
What kind of team are you looking for tomorrow, Tommy? Is it just same again? Is it just the team that was at hand and the team the week before? Do you want the changes that Brendan Rodgers made a couple of weeks ago? You want them to stay in place?
It ain't broke. It doesn't need fixed at this minute in time. And, you know, maybe the only change might be either coming out and Jota going back in. But, you know, Adam Meada got a goal last week. He worked very hard. I thought he played quite well. You know, so he might just sort of, you know, my thoughts on the yellow jersey. If you've got the yellow jersey, you keep it and do your thing. But that's,
what do you make of Liam Scales, Tony? I don't think I've talked to you about this, but what do you make of Scales? For me, Scales is a guy who keeps coming back at Celtic, isn't he? I think I was looking at it earlier, and I think Rodgers has signed 4 centre backs in the transfer window since he came back as manager. Gustav Lagerbielke, Mike Nawrocki, Nat Phillips, remember him, and Austin Trusty. And despite all that, Liam Scales has been the most consistent presence in that defensive line, which says a lot about Liam Scales, a lot about Brendan Rodgers, the way he views Liam Scales, but also Scales' resilience, because there's been times when he's been taken out of the team again for someone else, and he's come back in. And I think it looked like Austin Trusty had finally displaced him out of the starting 11. But last few weeks, Scales has come in and done a pretty good job alongside Carter Vickers. I know he's wasteful in possession at times, but he's a little bit braver on the ball, I would suggest, than Trusty, a little bit more proactive on the ball than Austin Trusty, and that doesn't always come off. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Scales keeps coming back and he's almost like a jack in a box?
You've got to admire that resilience from Liam Scales, because every time he gets written off and people say that he's good cover for, you know, the 2 American boys at the back, Carter Vickers and Trusty. You know, he proves himself by forcing his way back into the team. The manager clearly likes him, and a lot of that, and I stick by this, is what he sees at training. And Scales clearly has the right application and right attitude at training, whether he's playing or he's not. And he will always divide opinion because of what you said. His passing can be erratic. He can maybe take unnecessary risks, but he never lets you down, does he? I mean, he gives his all, and I know that's a prerequisite for a Celtic player, giving you 100% effort, but, nothing phases him, regardless if he's in a rich vein for him or he makes a mistake or two. He's always the same. Whenever you speak to him, he's always like, if I play, I do my thing. All I need to do is impress the manager. And clearly he impresses the manager because the manager does like him. And in any other walk of life, he might have been shunted out the door by this point. But you see, he keeps bouncing back, doesn't he? And he's going to have a cracking end to the season because he can still do the job. I've no qualms about him being in there. I don't. Whenever I see his name in the team sheet, I don't. I don't flinch or say, "Oh no, that's a worry." I just trust him now, and the chips fall where they may. If he makes a mistake, he makes a mistake. You kind of learn to accept that about Liam Scales. But when he's on his game, when he's concentrated and he's bang on, he's pretty solid. He's solid enough for domestic stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously the step up to Europe is what everyone will be considering, especially in the future of transfer window. It does just strike me though, like Brendan Rodgers still hasn't really found a permanence in the centre defence, despite signing Austin Trusty last summer. So it just makes me wonder about what his intentions will be in the transfer market around the defensive positions this summer. That is all up in the air. I don't want to get too much into that because I think this week is more about acknowledging what is here in the now and what has been achieved here in the now rather than thinking too far ahead. But that's just something that's been a little bit in the back of my mind. And I think that, the pass that Liam Scales makes for Rio Tate in that Scottish Cup semi-final, I think is something Austin Trusty can't do. Austin Trusty obviously has other strengths, but I think in these domestic games, when you are trying to break down a team who is sitting deep, I think Liam Scales does offer a little bit more in that regard. And if he misplaces a pass, if he misplaces a pass or two, that's the kind of price you pay for it.
It's not spoken about enough, that pass.
For
it's the definition of the defence splitter. It opens everything up, and all Hatate has to do is square it. Doesn't even need to think, because, as I say, that's probably the goal that would have pleased Brendan Rodgers the most last week. You're taking a centre back who does get criticism for his passing and the way he carries the ball, and absolutely confident, strode forward and saw that pass. Hatate makes the run, granted, but it takes a lot of skill to execute something like that. And the minute that's executed, the whole of Hampden opens up, and Adam Ida just goes to where he should be, and Hatate plays the ball in. I mean, he actually falls over the ball, put into the net, because he fell into the net, didn't he, Adam Ida? That's how perfect everything was. And Liam Scales' contribution for that, I won't say it was underestimated, but it was kind of just lost in the ether of a decent performance. Celtic winning 5-0. And so, big up to him for that. That's what you want to see more of, because he's got that in his locker. It reminded me, it was a very Greg Taylor-esque pass for me.
Yeah.
The way he puts the ball up in midfield and moves forward and then puts it inside. Greg Taylor's adept at that. And I clearly think that guys like Scales are thinking, okay, when you move into that position, we've watched the wee man do that on many an occasion and try to think of when they can, perform the same way. And I like that, because clearly those things are rubbing off on other players. When you get in that position, have the eye for the pass. Don't just, labour with the ball and wait till somebody comes towards you. Quick thinking, switch on. And Greg Taylor's very good at that, switching on and playing that inside pass, which opens up a defence. So I clearly think Scales has watched him do that, and because that's exactly the way Greg would have executed it if he'd have been in the same position.
You reading the tea leaves more on Taylor, Tony? I was looking at Callum McGregor, what he had to say yesterday's press conference. Spoke at length about Greg Taylor's stay-in and being a dual threat with Kieran Tierney. Potentially Celtic playing inverted one week, and Tierney playing more out on the wing another week, or even changing it up in a match. And talking openly about that, it just feels like if Greg Taylor was on his way out, I don't think Callum McGregor would be speaking in those terms. And I just got the sense, and even got the sense from Rodgers recently, just like just has been a slight change in tone the way he's talking about Greg Taylor. And again, I don't think McGregor would be as forward talking about Greg Taylor. If something wasn't in the works here, something has to be in the works here with Taylor at this point.
I mean, you had the manager saying last week he would never give up on him. The minute he said that, I thought something's happened here. You know, you had Greg Taylor with his, with his baby and stuff like that, showing him to the fan, being the mascot and all that. There was just a sea change, wasn't there, from that moment onwards? And then, as you say, I don't think players would be allowed to speak about other players' contractual situations if something.
Yeah, or it would be very surface level, I think, Tony.
Yeah.
Like he would talk about him in general terms, but I thought McGregor was quite specific yesterday talking about what Taylor could do next season, and that just made me think something's happening here.
So that's, and I think it's like everything else, isn't it? You get your ducks in a row and you filter them out. You drip feed Good News Week, don't you?
Yeah.
Once, hopefully good news this week will be Celtic win the title. We could keep that feel-good factor coming on over the weekend by announcing Taylor staying. But like you, I think he'll stay, or he will be staying, and Celtic are just going to wait to announce that.
We do know that Celtic like to do that. They like to take advantage of good news and a good news cycle. So there's stuff in the works, like they'll win the title, potentially new contracts or stuff. Brendan Rodgers talking quite cryptically about the idea of players being here in their prime next season, and that season ticket video. I don't know if you clocked that. That was interesting. Yeah. But there's stuff like they've not announced the Adidas deal for next season, like the extension of that. They've still not announced that, so that'll be in the offing as well. There's a few bits of good news in the offing that Celtic will like to trumpet over the next few weeks, because I think they see this few weeks as a clearing of the decks and just positivity from here until the end of May in the build up to that Scottish Cup final. And everything after tomorrow, if the league is clinched tomorrow, everything is then in service of building up to a peak in the Scottish Cup final against Aberdeen.
Of course, and and let's not kid ourselves as well. There's going to be some positivity in a news cycle said spun from the other side of the city. Let's not be about the bush with that one, as the manager would say. But so that's fine. But again, like you, I don't particularly care what happens on the other side of the city. Of course you care in the sense that it's your rivals and you'll be aware of what they're doing. You don't exist in a vacuum, but I'm always about what our club do. What are we going to do to keep on top of Scottish football? What are we going to do to, make even greater strides in Europe? That for me is where Celtic are at now. They had a brilliant season in Europe this season. So what can we do to consolidate on that? What are we going to do? And I'm looking forward to the good news cycle that comes from Celtic in terms of players coming in.
The word of the day, Callum McGregor obviously did a broadcast press conference, but in his interview with the written press overnight, the word of the day wasn't even consolidation, it was acceleration. He was talking about Celtic accelerating and everyone within the club being aligned on that acceleration, which was quite interesting. And also was it was put to him about getting more competition from Rangers, etc. And I think he closed off basically saying if Celtic do everything right, then it doesn't really matter what they do. So that is also, it's not just Celtic fans saying that. That is also Callum McGregor saying that as the captain, the appointed captain of Celtic, saying that if Celtic do everything right and perform to their potential, it shouldn't really matter what other teams do. And that, I think, is the mentality within Celtic at the moment.
And Callum McGregor is the manager of the field, isn't he? And on the field. Yeah. So
he's very influential, Callum McGregor. He's a very influential character, and it was very interesting as well. He was very involved in the process of bringing Rodgers back to the club in terms of flying out to Spain with him, having meetings with him. He was involved in that process, so he's not someone who's just isolated from what's going on behind the scenes at Celtic. You can read into what Callum McGregor says as a kind of barometer of where things are heading at Celtic.
Yeah, and you can hear the manager's voice when Callum McGregor speaks.
Yeah.
So if Callum McGregor's talking about acceleration, you bet your bottom dollar the managers used that word and said, no, not consolidation. You're accelerating, which I like. How's that for a strap line, John? You know what I mean? Acceleration, not consolidation. I think that would That would put out a good message, wouldn't it? For
Yes.
Celtic, you know,
Yes.
I'd like that. If the Celtic PR are watching, get onto that, troops. Come on, do something with that. But yeah, I mean, but that's the kind of thing you would do, wouldn't it? You know, hashtag that kind of stuff and just say, look, this is the next part of the plan. You know, the manager, because even this week we've had to put up with various people telling you your manager's going to Tottenham, despite the manager saying last week he's 150% here next season, and he's going to.
I think if you're a pundit in Scottish football, Tony, it should be a mandatory viewing to at least watch Brendan Rodgers' press conferences to know what he's saying, because he's not going anywhere this summer. He's made it clear. If he goes anywhere this summer, it would be the biggest U-turn. It would be the biggest U-turn Brendan Rodgers has ever done, and he's done a couple in his time. So Brendan Rodgers is here next season.
I bang that drum all the time, John. I say one of the most important things about Brendan Rodgers is to listen to what he's saying. just listen. When he speaks, listen. He tells you things. You know, he signposts it. Other times he's cryptic, but he does speak because he's a very wise man. He's got lots of wisdom to impart. And so, you know, and you accept that that's kind of, you get the fact that he's very successful and clubs will look at him and stuff. But the manager's words were, I am 150% here next season. And even me, I get annoyed at that because you can only give 100%, John, right? I hate that 110% and all that. No, you can't give 110%. You can only give 100%. So even when he said that, I was kind of like, I know what you mean, Brendan. I get that, but yeah, fine. But you know, there's still people. He's going to Tottenham. He's going to enter. Seriously, fine. And as you say, if he does go to Tottenham or whatever and perform the U-turn, then his legacy would go right down the Swanee. And you know,
Brendan Rodgers came back to repair his Celtic legacy. I don't think he's going to do anything in a hurry. He's here for 3 years minimum. He said there'll be talks on a potential contract this summer. So how all that plays out, it remains to be seen. But we are going to have Brendan Rodgers in the building for one more season. But it's about this season. It's about tomorrow. It's about this potential title win. I'm sensing a lot of excitement in the chat. It's moving very quickly. It's moving so quickly that I've not been able to bring in many comments today, for which I apologise. But yeah, leave your comments below after this is live if you want to give us your thoughts on Celtic's potential title win, their goal scoring, Liam Scales, everything we've talked about today. We'll be back tomorrow. Tony's at Tannadice. We'll be back. We'll be discussing Celtic's, hopefully, a title win. But win, lose or draw, Tony, we'll be there tomorrow and speaking about another Celtic match.
Indeed. Can't wait.
Yeah. Again, thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks to everyone below. We'll be back tomorrow. There's plenty more coming up on celticway.co.uk later today, including Brendan Rodgers' press conference and all the news from that. So we'll see you again. Enjoy your Friday. Goodbye.